Hey, Guru Nation, welcome back. We have Deepti Patkian. She's been on before, um, once or twice. I can't remember, Deepti. At least once,
One, yeah, twice.
twice. So now it's the third time.
I come from working at the site for many years and then moved into the startup role, startup specialist. I was in the
Aha.
startup that role, and then now I'm in CTM role.
That seems to be a role, startup specialist,
Hmm.
and probably increasingly so now that there's more studies. I mean, there's more studies than I've ever seen. And I keep saying
Hmm.
that every year. And every year since 2019, it's true. Um, and I don't think that's going to slow down, like with the AI figuring out which small molecules can bind to receptors with more affinities. Like, I actually think we're going to have more studies, although I think they'll fail more. But it's like study startup is going to be a booming subset of this industry. Why do you think more people don't look to study startup?
Because I think from the outside, it's just not clear, or they just don't know that there is such a specialized role that handles just startup on the sponsor or CRO side. On the side, a CRC typically would do everything. Well, some sites do have the regulatory person handling parts of the startup, but a CRC is very much involved. That's how I used to think. I had no idea there was such a role. Very specialized, particularly working only on startup activities with each of the sites.
And that's where you were like is that where you were like a functional, what's the FSP? What was it called? What did that acronym stand for at this company?
FSP is a functional service provider. So I moved from big pharma to the CRO world, uh, in the site activation world, in that model where you're dedicated to one particular
Now I'm curious, was it the same pharma you
sponsor.
left that you were a
Mm-mm,
FSP for, or was it a different one?
different one.
Different one. And to become a FSP, like to work under a FSP model, the CRO chose that for you, right? You didn't come to them and say, "Hey, I
Correct.
want FSP model."
No, no, that was the need at the time, and that's how yeah, I entered
I
in the
actually got this
CRO world.
question the other day, so I'm glad that we're bringing that up because in the first two interviews we didn't really mention it too much. But the other day, somebody actually asked me on a live stream, "Hey, can you discuss more about FSP and how the differences, pros and cons between that and regular employment?" Who better than Deepti? Like, this is perfect.
I was in that role for a brief period of time. I had to step away for personal reasons from that role. I had to take a break, and then I now in the last 1 year, less than a year, I've been in the CTM role.
Yes, we gotta get into CTM, but as far as FSP, like somebody that's done both, even though it was a little bit for you. In the land
Mhm.
of the blind, he with one eye is king. So, can you tell us what you see as a FSP, what you saw during your time?
So as the FSP model, essentially you are like quote unquote an employee of the particular sponsor you're dedicated to. You mm, many times, like most cases, have their provided laptop. You do their specific trainings. You have a direct point of contact with the sponsor that you work with, in addition to your CRO,
And
like a line manager, if you will.
do you notice any differences at all between FSP model and actually working like for a drug company directly, or was it the same?
Yes, it's certainly different. It's different to be in a service provider um,
Mm.
environment for sure. Um, and it's a different mindset. At the end of the day, our patients are at the forefront, no matter what. But there's, you know, relationships to maintain, um, additional tasks to perform. It's certainly different to be in a service provider. environment.
Which one do you think, like, if somebody's looking into this right now, should they not do FSP if that's what they're offered, or you think it's still worth doing, or which one do you
I
prefer?
think um, I've gained in both experiences, so it's hard for me to say. It can be a blanket statement like, no, FSP is not for you, because every person's factors are going to be different in what kind of a background you have, and now you're trying to enter a field, maybe, so it's hard to make a blanket statement like that. I personally have gained a lot in both experiences, so to me they're both comparable. It has definitely contributed to my professional growth, um, being in both environments. Like I said, I was in the FSP model very, very briefly.
So basically, guys and gals, it doesn't matter. Just take it.
Mm.
I think people overanalyze too much what their jobs are going
Yeah,
to.
maybe.
Don't you notice this? Like, and maybe you were like this too, but because it's a big decision when you're coming from, let's say right, you came from the site, you went to the CRO space, right? And then through that FSP or site pharma, in your case, it
Mhm.
was site sponsor, which is unusual. Site sponsor and then CRO with a FSP for a sponsor, and now CTM with a
Another Sarah.
another CRO. So I think maybe, let me not speak for you, when you made that first jump from site to sponsor or site to CRO, it's like a big leap. The other ones,
Yes.
they appear to be smaller leaps because they're the same
Mhm.
kind of company still, but the site is like a different planet because we're dealing with patients, right? We have the
Yeah.
interaction with patients face to
Yeah.
face. So I think a lot of people overanalyze too much, like in that first jump. Oh, should it be FSP? Should it be 1099? What if it's only a 6 month contract? What if it's only a 12 month? What if it's a W 2? I get these questions all the time. I'm like, if you want to be in this world, you take the jobs that you get. And once
Mhm.
you're in, you can get anything else if you're
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. 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 Certainly, it was a big leap. We discussed in our first conversation about that jump. Um, it Having been in academia and working with patients for many years, you have to somehow stand out and prove to them that they've got to give you a chance. And I've gotten very lucky. I'm very blessed that I got that opportunity. And then once you're on this side, it's just this whole new world that I didn't know existed. It looks very different from the other side.
Be honest, Deepti. Aren't you glad you
Hmm.
got out of academia?
Yes and no. Like I
Ah,
said,
no.
every job I've had, it has tremendously contributed to my growth. I've met some amazing people. I've worked with. I found mentors for life. I'm not just being diplomatic here, but really, I do miss it on some days. I miss that patient interaction,
Mm,
um, for
mhm.
sure, for sure. But I've always, when I started way back when, I've always wanted to be on this side of the field. So here I am,
Sponsor CRO. We're going to get into CTM because that's your newest role. How long have you
hmm
been in this role now? It's recent, right?
about a year.
About a year. So you have enough of a perspective. Yeah, I know. I'm
Hmm.
with you on the, as somebody who's done both as well, and now I'm back at the site level. When I was monitoring, I had like a 3 to 5 year stint where I was monitoring or PM. Mm, Half of that time was for my own CRO, but it was so strange to just see the patient numbers and not know, for the
Hmm.
first time, not know who that is. Every patient has a story. Like when you work at the site, you get to know these patients, especially when you're in charge of retaining them. And you get to know just about everything about them, like their latest vacations, where they went. I mean, it's so. such a drastic change to go from that to this is patient number 00008, and then you're just supposed to remember them like that. So I think that's
Mhm.
definitely something that's missing. I don't think it would ever be appropriate for CROs and sponsors to actually get to know the patients on that level, but
Yeah.
it's just something that this industry is, and it is something that a lot of people who've gone on, like you, Deepti, to be CRAs and CTMs do miss. A lot of the times they come back to it to finish their careers.
Yeah.
So, CTM,
Mhm.
why did you make that jump? Was it offered to you or did you always want this?
No, I had not thought of this, to be honest, this role. Like I said, I had to step away from the startup in the CRO FSP model role for personal reasons, and I had to take a break. But the way things kind of panned out, this role came forward, and I actually spoke to someone on LinkedIn in this role, um, got some background information, and I thought I will try and see how it
So,
goes.
so normally when somebody goes to CTM, they usually go from like monitor, right? Like
Yeah,
CRA
yeah.
or a PM,
Mhm.
one of those two. So you did study startup special. Well, you were coordinator, then you were study startup,
Mhm.
then you were central monitoring associate. Um,
Yeah.
and then I see you took like well, you took a little bit of break in between those two, and
Mhm.
now you're CTM. Like, how do you do that? Because most of the time they want like monitoring experience, no?
They do. They do. It was actually kind of interesting. I think it also, like any job application and the hiring decisions, there's just so many different factors, right? And at the time, there was a need for CTMs, and they were willing to be open to people that didn't have the traditional traveling CRA experience. I
Uh,
have many, many years of the site experience. I was at a sponsor. Even within the startup specialist role at the sponsor, I had gotten more involved with other aspects outside of startup. I was fortunate to have that opportunity. I was doing a little bit of extra, I feel like, throughout. So I was able to explain that in terms of transferable skills to them in the interview. And again, the same thing. Please give me a chance. I have the passion, I have the drive, and I'm a quick learner. Just give me a chance.
Transferable skills is important. We need to talk about it. Um, so when you applied for this job, did you apply for it or did you just put your resume out there or just because you're so active on LinkedIn? You're actually very active on LinkedIn. Deepti is a model. Believe it or not, guy,
I
Deepti is a
don't know about
model
that.
for how people should be using LinkedIn. Um,
Thank you for the
did they
kind
approach
words.
you or did you seek this role?
I solved it.
I see. And it's a good company. It's one that they're big. They're hiring like crazy, just like all the CROs. So the interview went, or the interviews,
Hmm.
I'm guessing, well, even
Yeah.
before the interviews, you saw this job posted, right? Or how did you
Hmm.
see it? You saw it on a job board?
Someone had posted about it on LinkedIn actually. So I
You
reached
see,
out to that
guys,
person. He was
people,
in that role at that time and he posted about it. So I just reached out to him and he was very, very, very kind to talk me through the whole thing and just explain because I wanted to know what it is. And he
okay.
reviewed my resume.
So let's break that down because that's overlooked by so many. I'm glad I
Hmm.
brought this is why I got to slow down these interviews sometimes. A CTM at the same CRO that you work for now posted on LinkedIn where you happen to be active. You're like a power user. a job that said, my company's hiring for CTMs. If you know anybody, please apply. This is what companies do, by the way, guys, in a hiring shortage. They tell their staff, hey, please share the word, spread the word. LinkedIn,
Mm.
we're more powerful together than we are by ourselves, blah, blah, blah. Deepti saw this. You were connected with this person?
Yes,
Did you
I
know
already
him
was.
well?
Um, Through LinkedIn. I
Through
haven't actually
LinkedIn.
met him.
I see. And did you ever message him before or comment on one of his posts, or you just knew him? You were aware of him?
I was aware of him.
Okay. So that's important, guys. So this is another reason why you need to be on LinkedIn. Okay, this is how, if you notice, Deepti didn't see this on Indeed or ZipRecruiter or Glassdoor. She saw this on LinkedIn through her news feed. Just a regular
Mm.
person she's connected to. If you want a job, whatever role you want, it just makes logical sense to connect with those same people on LinkedIn
Mm-hmm.
that already have
Absolutely.
those roles. Like it sounds so logical, yet so few people do it. So he
Yeah,
posted
it
this.
makes sense. Yeah, and I had seen his name because of somebody in my network that had like liked or posted on his previous post. So
Mhm,
that's how I sent him a LinkedIn invite, but that was way before any of this. I
I
wasn't
see.
really looking because of the situation I was in
Yeah,
at the time.
You're preparing. At that point, when you're making connections, you're not looking for anything. You're just, hey, I want to expand my network. That's it. I want to follow you and see what you post. And maybe every now and then, you're going to post a nugget, a golden nugget that's going to give me some insight into your role. Or you're going to post the opportunity, which in this case, he did. You saw it.
Mm.
What did you do? You instantly message him, or you thought about it for like a few weeks?
I thought about it because, like I said, I had to step away from the previous role for personal reasons. I had to think with 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 what I had got going on. But I reached out. I figured, it doesn't hurt to just ask because he wanted the way he posted it. If you want to know more about the CTM role, reach out to me.
Mm,
So you know what? Let me just find out what it is. It doesn't have to go anywhere immediately. Let me just ask because to me the CTM role was new.
mhm. You've worked with
Um,
CTMs in the past, though, through all your
yeah,
positions.
I've been in positions where I have reported into that role.
Hmm. So, in the back of your mind, it was something you would consider. And when you saw it, you said, hey, you know what? Doesn't hurt to have an interview or just learn more. Let me message him. So, you message him directly on LinkedIn, or you followed like what
Mm.
he said in the post?
He said to message him in the
Okay,
post,
okay. So then
so
when
I
you did,
followed.
like, just give an example, like a generic, what did you tell him? Hey, I saw your post. I'm interested. That's it.
Yeah, just
Okay.
straightforward. I saw your post, and I would like to know more about the role. And he was kind enough to give me time in his busy schedule, and we talked
Wow.
about the role. I sent him my resume.
And then he
He looked
probably,
at it. He provided great pointers to update it, and yeah, it ended up being a referral because he felt it
I
was
see.
my resume was worthy enough.
So with a few tweaks, I'm guessing transferable skills were added.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
what kind of skills did you already possess in your career so far that CTMs also have to have? Like, because I'm sure that's what you had to tweak your resume with.
Yeah, so a CTM is a clinical team manager. So being able to speak to the fact that you've managed team members, along with just being responsible for the overall project. But I had done that in a site role, at the site level. Then at the next positions, I had the sponsor experience as well as a little bit of, CRO experience. So that helped as well. There's a financial component to this role, which I don't have that much experience in, but I was very honest about it, and you know, not there's no way to make up that kind of stuff. You either know it or you don't, and that kind of exposure to the financial world I had not had. But yeah, attention to detail is like so common to all roles across in our field. But they particularly specifically the team management aspect was important. I had also worked on as a project manager, worked on a large clinical trial where I worked directly with sites, but at the site level. So I was able to take that strong experience. I had done a little bit of monitoring as part of that role at the site. I went to different sites. So I was able to use that because I've not been in a CRA title role, but I have that experience. I've actually been to sites and monitored. Um,
Mm,
done everything from startup to closeout because that's the CTM role. It's not just I was only in the startup work, right? So now I was going to be, in the whole start to end process, which is quite a big responsibility. And
yeah, end to end.
so being able to speak to that I've done it in bits and pieces. Um, it's just a matter of leaning into those specific experiences when the time is right, and that I'm not afraid to ask questions.
So now that you've been a CTM now at the time of this recording for about a year, maybe a little over a year, no? Or right around a
It
year.
was to April 2021.
Ah, so a year and a half. Okay, so you've been a CTM for a good year and a half now. Um,
No, no. See, in the CTM role, just about a year.
a year. Okay,
Hmm.
CTM for a year. You have, I'm guessing, enough of a idea of, the role, more or less.
Hmm.
When, because I'm imagining when you're in charge of like a large project, you're not necessarily involved in all of the details like you are, let's say, when you're a CRA or when you're a study
Hmm.
startup specialist, right? You get involved, and I've never been a CTM, so I'm asking. You get involved mainly when there's problems to be addressed.
Yes, but another key part is to catch before something becomes a problem. So being able to keep my eyes and the team's eyes on that, you know, any pitfalls or
Mm.
issues that may become big problems later, we have to, mitigate those at the right time. So
What's a
it is definitely
surprising one?
a lot more zoomed out.
What's a
It's a lot more
surprising
zoomed out.
problem
So
that you see beforehand? Like now that you've been doing it for a year, what's a problem that you had to fix before it became a huge problem that you didn't expect?
if I were to pick, so in this role, I'm also still involved with startup. Um, and it's also in conduct. So it's juggling of both these phases, which is challenging. And so because I come from the startup world, uh, I'm able to, that every trial is so complicated in startup, right? It just depends. There's so many different moving parts, and so communication has always been like this important part of everything we do, and there's been differences in understanding from what the site is saying versus what we're understanding, and being able to bridge that gap to do things in parallel so timelines are not further stretched out, or if there is something that is going to be like there's one thing dependent on the other, right? So if something at the start is a problem right now, 3 months down the line, that means we're not going to meet that deadline. And so, what are our plan B, plan C? to be able to still meet that activation deadline. Um, that's just one of the many examples.
Sounds stressful. As somebody who's in charge, my third coordinator starts today for my site, my startup. And we're in the middle of study startup now on 2 studies. One should be done soon. We already had our SIV, and the other one we're just getting started on startup. So I've noticed that the problem with complex studies, meaning studies where, and most of them are complex now, studies where there's a lot of vendors involved, like you have an imaging
Mhm.
vendor, you have an ophthalmology vendor, you have ECG, cardio, central lab, recruiter, IRT, all throw any letters you want together. That's another system.
Mhm.
You have all these like silos, and
Yeah.
then each one has like a 50-page manual. And you're like, okay, here's your manual for this vendor. Here's your 100-page manual for this vendor. Here's your 70-page manual for this vendor. You know what the problem is? Nobody reads this whole thing. Like, so now you're right, because communication is the most important thing, because even the CRA don't know. When we have SIV, we take the CRA to a vendor, like an imaging vendor, let's say. The vendor has questions about, hey, what do we need to do? I'm going to tell you the truth here, Deepti, because the truth is what this podcast is all about. Vendor tells me, hey, Dan, ask your monitor, how do we upload these images? Like, is this file okay or is this file okay? What do we do? I ask CRA. CRA says, hey, you know what? I don't know. It's in the manual. Okay. So now I tell the vendor, hey, they don't know, but it's all detailed in the manual. Trust me. You know what vendor tells me? Dan, I understand, but we don't have time to read this manual. We have patience. We're doing this as a favor to your PI because we like your PI. We needed someone to tell us what to do. So
Yeah.
now it's
Yeah.
either me as a coordinator that have to read
Mhm.
this manual, where it's very technical manual, where if you don't understand ophthalmology, it makes no sense, or you find the key person to communicate with at that vendor. And that's exactly what it was. And if it wasn't for this person at the vendor from the sponsor side being proactive and emailing us, hey, I am your coordinator for this procedures. Let us know if any questions. I just emailed her, hey, yes, we do have questions. No one knows the answer. Can you tell us? She said, oh, yeah. In a very simple email, she answered, like, she ended our week and a half long hold up over this thing, but only because she reached out first, because I had no idea even who she was or even that she existed. So I think you're absolutely right. And as a CTM, I would encourage you guys to tell all your stakeholders, email the site, because the sites oftentimes don't even know these people
Mhm.
exist.
Mhm. Yeah. 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 And CRAs don't always know everything, but at least that's how I talk to my team, and we do our best to find the right person to to connect to the site or look at the manual ourselves and send a snapshot or
Yeah.
something. Template, like, read the manual is a very template answer, and to me as a CTM, I try not to, encourage that.
So in this industry, there's reality and there's by the book.
Mhm.
By the book, everybody should know all the manuals, be familiar with everything. On page 63 of this lab manual, it says this. On page 74 of the ophthalmology manual, we should do this. That in reality, that should be the coordinator and the CRA and the CTM or the PM. I don't know, somebody. Or in theory, it should be them. In reality, who knows all this stuff? Not to put you on the
It's
spot,
tough.
but who knows it all?
No, it's tough. It's tough. Everybody is working together. Not one person knows the whole manual,
Do you
and
think
we have
someone
to
should
reach out
though?
to
Do you think someone
um
should or no?
someone should be able to give a straight answer to the site.
Who, the PI?
Um, no, someone on this side. Um, yeah, we have to look into the manual ourselves many times. But
Because that's the answer we usually get as a site when we ask. We usually either ask the CRA, the in-house CRA, somebody, project manager, and somebody. The usual answer is when it's complicated, they tell us to refer back to the whatever manual we're asking about. And it's like, okay, if we already know that, and we're still emailing you, so that's not the answer we want. In reality, we do need like these specialists who are experts at that particular aspect. So
mm,
in this case, it was this lady who was a coordinator from the CRO side on their vendor for ophthalmology exams, and then I have my vendor as a site who does our ophthalmology assessment. So again, if it wasn't for her emailing us, and I don't know if somebody told her to do it or she just does it because it's part of her job, like she takes it seriously. But she introduced herself. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have known this person existed. And she had all the answers for what we needed.
mm,
And but if she never sent that email, we would have gone another week, 2 weeks until the CRA complained like what's happening, and then we still wouldn't have had the answers. So it's like that 2 weeks, she saved if a clinical trial cost $1 million a day. I mean, what? She saved $14 million maybe, theoretically.
yeah. So she emailed you around the same time. Was that a coincidence, you think?
Proactively. I don't know. Either she did or somebody told her, "Hey, we're in startup. In
This
startup, you
site needs help.
make contact with the site once a week." I don't know, but it worked out okay. But I've been in studies where it doesn't work out, and you don't know till later.
Yeah,
Like, oh, we actually had somebody who had the answers, but we didn't even know who they were.
yeah.
So it's back to your point about communication. Um,
Mhm.
what are some other problem? Like, I'm guessing recruitment's a big one. If sites don't recruit,
Yeah, yeah. Certainly, that is one of the metrics we follow closely, from activation to current date, where we at, what sort of screening activities have been done, not just to keep an eye or like put them on the spot or just question them in their "what are you doing" type of a question, but genuinely, what are the hurdles you're seeing? How can we help? Is there something in particular that we can work with the sponsor to get to you?
if you
Yeah,
ask my
that's
PI that question right now, they would both say, make the inclusion easier because
yeah,
they're
yeah.
not
That's not
realistic.
always possible. That's always not possible. But when
Yeah.
something like that comes up, it's always good. And, it just depends on the sponsor you work with. But it's always good to, if they have further questions related to IE criteria, or why a certain criteria is written a certain way, it's always good to connect the science group with PI directly so they can get some background, because it may seem unrealistic. It is unrealistic sometimes, but there's a reason why it was written a certain way, or why
Right.
there is no leeway, or why we just can't give you that waiver. um, Again, going back to the communication piece, instead of just saying no, not possible, explain a bit more, again, as much as possible within the given guardrails. Explain, so it helps
Yeah.
them understand, and it feels like a partnership.
I think that's actually going to be like this is a problem, an issue that the industry is going to have to figure out because these studies are getting more complex. I actually think they're going to continue to get even more complex, not easier, with bioinformatics, with
Mm,
artificial intelligence. The systems now, it's just in the beginning phase, but I have one study where, without giving it away, patients have to wear a wearable during the screening period. So not only is there inclusion exclusion criteria for the study, but based on the bioinformatics we get from the wearable, that's another inclusion exclusion factor. That has nothing to do with what's the patient's taking or their medical history or anything. It's how they present as far as their bioinformatics. So sponsor said, hey, expect 50% screen fail rate before the wearable data.
Mhm.
After the wearable data, expect another 15% on top of it. So it's headed this direction, guys, not the other way. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but we're just gonna have to get used to it. So I think what Deepti said about communication is gonna be even more important. Do you think CTM is like the orchestrator of all this? Like, is it your responsibility, Deepti, if let's say you're managing 12 vendors for a study and each vendor has somebody that the site is contacting, and let's
Mhm.
say you're in having an issue, is it your responsibility if you're noticing one of the vendors is not reaching out to the sites or there's issues? Is it
Yes,
your responsibility as CTM to know that this is not happening and you need to get involved?
yes, certainly. I don't have all vendors for the study.
Mm,
It can be split depending on the team of CTMs we have.
I see.
But yes, certainly vendor management is a big part of this role.
Yeah. Wow. And then as far as when it comes to sponsors, because CTM, I mean, you're in a sponsor communicating face, right? Like you have a
Mm-hmm.
sponsor facing element of your role,
Yeah.
which you don't really get too much as a CRA or a study startup specialist. But CTM, you're dealing with sponsors. So what kind of things are sponsors asking that um, you are surprised? Maybe you didn't know about this before you were CTM.
Um, Again, depends on the kind of sponsor you're working with, but um, I've worked with sponsors that want to be very involved, that they want to catch things early on and not, or like be alerted of things early on and not become a big problem, or where they can help support. That's been a big theme of the whole communication. They want to know, and of course, from this side, when in in any situation, I try to be a part of the solution, not the problem. So when presenting the problem, also talk about what the mitigation plans are, what has been done so far. But they really want to know, at least the ones I've worked with. They really want to know early on.
Now, not every sponsor is the same, and not
Right.
every sponsor is as experienced as the other sponsors.
Hmm.
So, with that comes sometimes unrealistic expectations from
Hmm.
sponsors. Do you ever, I know you've only been doing it for a year as CTM, but have you ever had to push back against the sponsor and say, hey, that's just not realistic, like in these
Not
situations?
yet. Not yet. I've I've
Okay.
met I've met team members that have had realistic expectations so far. So far. But at the time of any discussions, expectation management is another big piece of this role from the beginning. You don't just paint this larger than life picture. You don't only paint problems, but managing the right expectations, setting
I
the right
see.
tone. But I've really not yet. I have had to push back on anything
I see.
related to vendors at least.
And what about getting involved with sites? Like
Hmm.
as a CTM, I'm guessing you're only getting involved with sites when you're trying to prevent a future problem. But like, what are some examples of cases where you had to get involved with a site?
Yeah, so this role is zoomed out, and that's where it's a bit of a challenge for me because I've been very close to the site, coming from the site to being that direct contact to the site to now one step zoomed out. I find it difficult at times personally to do that. So I'm like trying not to be this, micromanager to my CRAs, but also trying to understand, be involved with the process. So when sites are not following the protocol, there are source documentation issues, and IMV happens, and issues are discussed. That findings that came out of the IMV, the discussions that happen afterwards with the sites. I've been involved in that case, or if something has been pending for a long time, um, I step in and ask and write directly to the PI and relevant parties. It helps to see my email go through when the CRAs have not had any
I see.
success, or if something has to be discussed with the site that uh, you know the news has to be broken in a certain way, and so the CTM has to do that because and explain the reasoning or whatever.
Wow. So, hey, site, sorry, but we're putting you on a screening hold or stuff like that. Maybe,
Yeah.
maybe, or maybe not. But yes, all the issues. So basically, it's just problem solving. I mean,
It is.
you know, I've never done CTM. It sounds like something I probably might enjoy because I don't like to micromanage, but I don't know because I haven't done it. Well, I've done it on the small scale, like my own CRO. Essentially, I'm the
Mhm.
CTM, PM, lead CRA, everything. But like
Yeah.
on a real study where you have, all these moving parts and multiple sites, I'm not sure how I would respond, but it definitely takes a certain kind of personality. But you think that this can be learned by somebody?
Yeah. Yes. You have to have the right attitude and the mindset. Everything is not going to be moving and flowing like you wanted to, or you're not going to probably walk into a situation where everything is all set up and you're just providing that oversight. It just depends, right? At what point you join the project and how what has been done till date.
Hmm.
So yes, you're in definitely problem solving, but part of it is also big part of it is making sure the team is set up appropriately to support our sites, that they know what the workflow is. You have your SOPs, the protocol, and other guardrails given, but what that actually unfolds in the CRA's day-to-day interaction with the site, um, it's very important to make sure everybody's on the same page, because things can be relatively open to interpretation, and just maybe it's checklists or regular discussions or ad hoc trainings, um, to speak to the CRAs just to make sure, because it's uh, communication again, me telling them telling sites, and how it all unfolds in reality.
Yeah. This is the first time I had this thought, but
Mm.
I actually think that site owners would make good CTMs because what you're discussing and your responsibilities are very similar. They're basically parallel to my
There.
responsibilities from the site
Yeah.
level. Like those
Yeah.
same vendors, let's say you and I both are on the study. You're the CTM, I'm a site owner in Yuma.
Yeah.
I work with the same vendors you are. I'm
Hmm.
trying to solve the same problems, but just from our end. You're solving them for the whole study. I'm solving them for my whole site. But then
Hmm.
like you may have multiple study. I also have multiple studies. So and then you have your CRAs that you talk to. I have my coordinators I talk to. That's a
Hmm.
lot of like transferable skills from site director or site owner to CTM. Essentially, it's the same job, more or less, just reversed.
To a certain extent, yeah, they're counterparts, I would say, and definitely
Yeah, I
would
never
would
thought
make
about
great
that.
CTMs.
Because my business partner and I, Chris, we have a lot of CRAs contacting us to want to start
Hmm.
sites. And we've noticed in the 7 years we've been doing this, helping people start sites, CRAs, not necessarily the best site owners. And I think it's what you said, because they're so like zoomed in to certain problems, they don't know how to zoom out. But I think as we're talking, I think a much better candidate for a site owner would be a clinical trial manager, clinical team manager. And we haven't had too many of those. I can't remember being site owners. So I think there's something there.
Yeah,
Hmm.
certainly, definitely transferable skills. I
Maybe
see
in your
them as
future, Deepti.
parallel roles.
Maybe in your
Maybe,
future, site owner.
maybe,
Who knows?
maybe. I know who to
Uh,
contact. I know the right guy to contact for that.
yeah, I'm trying to always draw parallels because I think that the problems in this industry are the same. It's just the context of where you see them from.
Mhm.
Uh, all right. So, advice to anyone that's trying to be a CT. Well, advice for sites. How can a site make themselves look good to a CTM so that Deepti can say, "Hey, Deepti can talk to your study startup specialist and say, "Hey, send Dan a feasibility questionnaire."
Well, of course, you have to have the right population for the project, but your data entry timelines, the response rate to the CRAs.
Mm,
I know sites are very busy, they've got a lot of studies going on, but we really, I mean, it's very, very difficult to work with non responsive sites. And it's just follow up, follow up, follow up, and everybody gets tired, and we just spend so much time trying to get one thing done, and then issues pile up. Um, there's pending action items, and then there's an audit. We're not audit ready. It just snowballs. So if and also in addition to that, just honesty. I have some very honest sites that my
mm.
theories work with, and I personally appreciate that, because then we're not just sitting here thinking they expect something from us and we expect something from them, and then nobody's meeting expectations. If you're honest, just however brutal it is, we want
Mm.
to know so we can then have a targeted approach to solving the problem.
What's an example of honesty that you saw that you liked?
um, the protocol, uh, there's maybe there needs to be a bit more flexibility. um,
Well, yeah, all my PIs
um,
will tell you that right now. They're honest.
yeah, but vendors,
Mm,
specifically vendors,
I see.
what if there is a reason for
Yeah,
issues
I
related
got to
to
deal
that.
with one vendor today so we can start screening on a new study. It's the last vendor I need to deal with, ophthalmology, and they have to upload. I actually have to go pick up the USB card from them. I told
Mm,
them I will upload it for them in the portal we have to save them some work. But yeah, it's the last
well,
piece that we need to.
that's a very nice coordinator. We look for people like you at sites that
Deepthi,
will
you know where I'm
help
at.
bridge the gap.
Deepthi,
Help
you
bridge
know
the
where I'm
gap.
at. You know where I'm at. Yuma, Arizona. It's very sunny, sunniest place on the earth. Um, yeah. But no, thank you, Deepthi, for the interview. I mean, you've been a really good sport answering all the questions. Um, a lot goes
Thank
into
you.
being a CTM. So what's
Yeah.
is there any difference between, because when I hear CTM, I just think whether it's clinical trial manager or clinical team manager, it's
Yes.
basically like the boss of the entire study from the sponsor or CRO level. Like what is there any
Yeah.
difference?
So we are in. No, it's pretty similar. Again, different titles. Maybe the job description has a few differences here and there, but essentially we are responsible for meeting the clinical deliverables for the duration of the study from start to end in our assigned regions.
You are responsible. That's a big responsibility.
Yes, very loaded.
All right. How's your New Year's? Good? Busy?
It was good. Yeah, we got to get away, just disconnect. That's one of the challenges I've had, is just completely disconnecting. Um, and I was able to completely disconnect, meet family members after many, many years, and spend some quality time with my family as well.
That's an entire other podcast of how CRAs and CTMs keep their sanity. Um,
Yes,
maybe we'll do
for
that one
sure.
later. That's
For
another
sure.
hour.
Deep breaths every now and then during the day, because we have to prioritize a lot, and not everything is red category. Like, not everything is an emergency. And you have to really be able to work through that every single day. Otherwise, it's not possible, and not every email will get answered immediately, and that's okay.
I think we have to
But
put
just,
coordinators and site owners into that same group,
yeah.
how to deal with pressure, stress. Well,
Mhm.
that's another podcast. We'll do a part 4 with you. What about, as we wrap up here, the rest of like this year? Do you expect it to be as busy as last year, or are you seeing slowdowns already?
No, no slowdowns. Very busy. I have the work cut out already.
Good.
Uh, so,
All right, guys.
but
Well,
busy is
that
good. It's a good thing.
it's good because it keeps us busy, keeps the opportunities there. It's bad because we have to learn how to deal with um, prioritizing. So
Hmm.
has pros and cons. I mean, the inverse of this would be, hey, it's very slow. Then we have
Right.
stress. Then we're stressed about not having enough income. So
Yeah, or
we're
not
always stressed.
utilizing your expertise. Being able to utilize what you've got to the fullest is very important. You should learn. You should be in a position where you're learning every day. You're challenged every day. And like, everything was pretty new for me in this role when I started, pretty much. But I knew what I came with. So just ask questions, lean on people. Uh, you just have to ask, even within your teams, or the company, or LinkedIn.
LinkedIn. So everybody go connect. Deepti's LinkedIn is underneath the video. If you're listening on the podcast, it's in the show notes. Go connect with her. Stay tuned because we're gonna have her come on to talk about prioritization, how to manage um, expectations, work-life balance. That'll be something that's important for just about anyone in this space, really. Um, so stay tuned for that. And Deepti, if you needed more sites, you know where I'm at. And you can contact me
Certainly do.
for your
Yes.
projects. We're
Yes.
very
Thank
honest.
you.
All right.
Good. Good.
Thank you,
That's
everybody. Go
good. Thank you
connect.
so much for the opportunity, Dan. It's always a pleasure.
Of course, we'll do it again. You're a great guest. Come on. Everybody, like, subscribe, comment, share, go connect with Deep T. And catch y'all later. Bye bye.
Thank you.